If you've been using your DJI Osmo Pocket 3 in full auto mode, well, I have news for you. You're doing it all wrong. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why, and we'll dive into 3 crucial areas that will transform your content from basic to cinematic. First, we'll cover the must-have accessories that will immediately upgrade your setup. Next, we'll talk about choosing the perfect resolution and frame rate to capture smooth, detailed footage. And finally, we'll dial in exposure settings so you can say goodbye to blown out or underexposed shots. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first bit of accessories that I want to talk about today is the stuff that comes with the actual creator combo. I hope that everybody who bought this bought the creator combo because it wasn't very much more expensive, but it comes with so much more in the box. For instance, it has this battery extender, it has this tripod, and the biggest thing is it comes with a DJI Mic 2. If you didn't get the creator combo, then I recommend that you guys go for a different microphone, and the microphone I recommend you guys go with is this DJI Mic Mini, and the reason for that is because it's more affordable and it's just a little bit less noticeable. It's more compact, less intrusive really. It's just so much smaller. You can see that. So if you didn't go for the creator combo out the gate, I do recommend getting the DJI Mic Mini because this will sync with the Osmo Pocket 3 as well, and it's just a little bit smaller. I have this little guy here. I know a lot of people have mentioned this. It's from a company called Amazir or something like that. I think a lot of different companies make this, but Pocket 3 actually just goes inside. And then there's a little magnetic mount here that you can use as like a stand, so you can actually fold this down and you can use this as a stand, but that's not what I care about. What I care about is mounting it on any metal surface. So it comes with these little metal plates, and I have one mounted in my car underneath my rear view mirror, and I actually will hang my Osmo Pocket 3 upside down, comes down right underneath my rear view mirror, and I can use it then to talk to the camera while I'm driving. I can also flip the camera around and I can have like a little dash cam if I want to as well. So this is probably one of the most important accessories that I think you can get for your Osmo Pocket 3. And then the absolute most important accessory outside of that would be ND filters. And I've talked about these ones before. They're by a company called Start RC. Never actually heard of the company. These are Amazon cheapies. And these guys range from ND16 all the way up to ND256. There's 4 of them. But one thing I didn't like about these is I didn't like the fact that I had to try to guess like which filter I needed. So if I was out and it was really bright, I'd put one on, I'd realize, okay, I'm still overexposed, I'd put another one on, or I'd realize that I was underexposed and I'd have to change the filter. So what I decided to get is I decided to get this variable ND filter from K&F Concepts. And I know they make a lot of different accessories for the Pocket 3, and this thing works by just simply twisting the filter. So you twist it to the right and it goes to ND32. Twist it to the left and it will go down to ND2. So that way I can be out there and I can be talking to the camera, and if I realize that my exposure isn't right, I can just make adjustments on the fly without having to go in here and find a new ND filter. Also, another thing I like about these is you can actually turn off the Pocket and the ND filter can stay on the camera. It all fits in there nice and compact. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna talk a little bit here while I am on my way into the office. And first off, I just wanted to point out that I did leave on tracking. You may or may not have seen that I just turned a corner. And if you don't have on face tracking, when you have your DJI Osmo Pocket 3 set up like this in your car, you will see the gimbal move around a little bit from left to right. So you have to turn on face tracking when you're in the car in order to get that clean shot and make sure that the gimbal is facing toward me the entire time and that I'm not bouncing all over the frame. Okay, so let's just start this off by talking about frame rates. Okay, I get asked all the time about which frame rates people should be shooting in. Well, with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, of course, we're going to shoot in 4K as a setting, but we want to shoot in either 4K 30 frames per second or 4K 24 frames per second. That's really dependent on your personal preference. Now, for me, I shoot a lot of things in 4K 24 frames per second because it looks a little bit more cinematic to me, whereas 4K 30 does look maybe a little bit more crisp. Now, the reason why this is important is because as, you know, real estate agents, or even if you're just a content creator and you're walking around vlogging with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, there might be times when you want to shoot in slow motion. Now, in order to shoot in slow motion, you're going to want to shoot in 4K 60 frames per second. No matter what you decide to shoot with on your talking head stuff, 4K 24 or 4K 30, that's okay. You can still shoot at 60 frames per second and you can slow that footage down, but you need to understand a few different rules when it comes to using slow motion. Now, for me as a real estate agent, if I want to shoot, let's just say I'm doing some talking head, day in the life vlog style content, and then I end up at an open house or I end up at a new construction preview or showing or something like that, and I want to actually show off the property, I'm going to flip my settings in my DJI Osmo Pocket 3 to 4K 60 frames per second. Then I'm going to shoot everything, and then when I bring that in post, whether it's CapCut or Premiere Pro or whatever I end up editing that video on, I'm going to slow that footage down. So let's say I shot all my talking head style stuff at 4K 24 frames per second versus 30 frames per second. That's going to change how much I need to slow down that footage for it to look good in post. So if I shot my talking head style stuff at 4K 24 frames per second, then I'm going to want to slow down my footage down to about 40% if I shot that slow motion in 4K 60. The way you figure that out is you just take the frame rate, 24 frames per second, divided by the 60 frames per second. That's going to give you 0.4, and you guys know math from high school, you move the decimal place over 2, and now you have 40%. So take the frame rate that you shot most of your talking head style video with, divided by the frame rate you use for slow motion, which is typically 60 frames or 120 frames per second, depending on what camera you're using, and then that is what percent you can slow down that footage in post, and that's the way that works. So if I shoot in 4K 30 for the majority of my talking head style stuff, which I typically do on my real estate walkthrough videos, then I can slow down my footage by 50%. Does that make sense? Shooting 4K 30 for talking head, shooting 4K 60 for slow motion. When I move that 4K 60 down to 50% speed, it's like a 4K 30 playback and everything looks smooth. If you decide that you don't want to follow these rules, what you're going to get is you're going to get what appears to be drop frames on your video. So it's going to look a little bit jittery, and it's not going to be that smooth slow motion that you were looking for, and really the whole purpose and reason why you decided to use slow motion anyways. All right, here we are, my second home at the office, and let's step inside and we'll discuss a few other things. Yeah, my office is kind of a mess, but that's just proof that I'm actually working. That's how I look at it. Okay, so the easiest way to make sure that your settings are dialed in on the Osmo Pocket 3 is through custom buttons. So the way that you access your custom buttons here is that you just swipe down from the top of the screen, and then you'll see right here in the top left-hand side of the screen, it shows like a little guy. Let's see, right there, you can see a little guy. And when you click that, that'll bring you into your custom buttons. These custom buttons are essentially presets that you can use to set your video frame rates, your resolution, your ISO, your shutter speed, pretty much anything that you need you can set up into a preset. I recommend doing one in 4K 24, 4K 30, and then 4K 60, and then having all of the subsequent settings set up to match those frame rates. And then of course for your fourth one, I guess you can choose whatever you want. I only have 3 of them used right now, but I would say a good idea for the fourth one would be to dial in your settings for short form video and stories and things like that. Okay, so now that we talked about resolution and frame rates, I just wanted to discuss really quick a little bit about exposure. So when we're dealing with exposure with the Osmo Pocket 3, if you want it to look the best it possibly can, it's important to do a few things in the settings. So the first thing that you want to do, if you don't want your footage to look like it's coming out of an iPhone or some sort of smartphone, is you want to turn the sharpness down to -2. What you want for a shutter speed is you always want to follow the 180-degree rule. So what that means is that whatever you have as far as like your frame rate, so let's just say right now I'm shooting in 4K 24, I want my shutter speed to be 1/50th, okay? If I was shooting in 4K 30, I'd want my shutter speed to be 1/60th. Does that make sense? So if you're shooting in 4K 60, you always want your shutter speed to be 1/120th. Okay, so you always want your frame rate to be half of whatever your shutter speed is, or as close as possible to that. And that's what's gonna give you your most natural looking motion blur. So I do recommend paying attention to the 180-degree rule. And if you're going to shoot in full auto, which a lot of people tell you that you should do, and I get that because you're using like a pocket-sized camera, that's okay. But I will say that the footage is not going to be as good as it could be coming out of this little camera. And the whole purpose of using this is so that you're not shooting everything on your iPhone, right? I have an iPhone too, and I have the iPhone 16 Pro, which makes really good videos. But in order to make the video coming out of this look even close to as good as the video coming out of the Osmo Pocket 3, I would have to fit this thing with like a case from Moment, potentially a ND filter. I would have to download a third-party camera app so that I could dial in all the settings right, and I could get the shutter speed correct and the ISO correct and the frame rates correct. But with the Osmo Pocket 3, it's a complete closed system. My stuff isn't downloading on my phone, and I can flip it over to manual mode. I can dial in the settings, and all I got to do is put on the ND filter that I mentioned earlier. So let's just run a little test right now. I'm gonna change the ND from ND32 to ND2, and you'll see, look at that. It's completely blown out. We'll move back to ND32. It's actually probably, yeah, right about there. And now you'll see that it's no longer blown out. It's like putting sunglasses on the lens of your camera, and now I'm in control of all the camera settings. I'm not allowing the camera to choose how my video quality looks. All right, I'm on a little nature walk here, just getting some exercise on my lunch break, but I wanted to show you guys an example of what I'm talking about. Right now, I am in manual exposure mode. I have my camera set to 4K, 24 frames per second. My shutter speed is 1/50th. And I actually have my ISO set to a range, which is 50 to 800. And I do allow the camera to move a little bit when it comes to ISO, because as long as it doesn't get above 800, I won't have too much grain. But I don't want to have to keep going in there and changing my ISO and manipulating the exposure. I'm okay with the camera doing a little bit of work. I should also mention that I have my camera set to normal color mode, so I'm not shooting in D-Log-M, so I won't have to go in there later and color grade the footage or anything like that. But now I'm going to show you guys what it looks like if I would leave this camera in full auto. And again, it may compensate a little bit for this super bright sun, but you'll see that as far as like motion blur goes and overall image quality, it doesn't look quite as good. So here we go. I'm gonna do that right now. Okay, so now we're in full auto, and you may not notice a massive difference, but to me, I noticed a difference. And you'll see that the motion blur seems to be a little bit off. The image is a little bit sharper. And overall, I think that this image looks a lot more like what you get out of a smartphone, like an iPhone 16 or one of the new Google phones or something like that. Let me know in the comments if you guys noticed a difference. Just so you guys know out there, those of you guys who don't know a lot about cameras, the reason for any difference that there would be is because what the camera does to compensate for how bright it is outside, and it's really bright outside, is they crank the shutter speed. So now, instead of following the 180-degree rule, they will crank the shutter speed way up to compensate for how bright it is outside. And what that adds is everything looks a little bit jittery. It just looks lower quality. Leave me a comment and let me know what you guys think. I suppose this is what I get for creating a video when it's like 1 p.m. Basically like high noon. I got the sun blasting me in the face. But I also wanted to show you guys this. This is actually me shooting in D-Log-M. So if you want the absolute best result out of this camera, you're going to shoot in 4K, pick 24, 30, or 60 if you're gonna do slow-mo. Then you're gonna set your shutter speed accordingly. You're gonna use an ND filter, and you're gonna shoot in D-Log-M. You're then going to do some color correction and some color grading once you bring this into CapCut or Premiere or whatever you edit on. So again, I'll do a quick like side-by-side of what this looks like with full auto versus manual settings. And then I will show you guys what all three of them look like next to each other. Full auto, manual settings, and then manual settings in D-Log, and then manual settings in D-Log after the color correction. So go ahead and leave me a comment. Let me know what you guys think of these differences. At the end of the day, I mean, it's all about your personal preference and what you guys like to see in your own videos. For me, I like high quality video, high quality audio, and that's why I have all the microphones and all the cameras and stuff like that. And me personally, I find it hard to put out content that doesn't look exceptional, or at least okay. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect, obviously. Right now, it's not perfect. I got the sun blasting me in my face, and I'm laughing right now because I'm walking by people. It's like the joy of vlogging on the Osmo Pocket 3 is that it doesn't like stand out, but the way that I have it right now, I have it on the extended battery with the tripod and everything attached to it. So it's a little bit longer, kind of does stick out. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't look perfect right now, but this is the highest quality I can get the footage to look given the circumstances. And for me, that's all I really care about. One other little tip that I'll give you guys is if you guys want to use this in its smallest possible form factor, which is like this, you know, without all of this hooked onto it, and you want to be able to grip this thing up here without this big screen protruding out, and you still want to shoot in horizontal, is if you swipe down from the top, you can actually select right here. You can select and you can choose whether or not you want to keep the camera in horizontal or vertical, regardless of how you have the screen. So you can actually flip the screen this way, and I'm still actually shooting in horizontal. So that way, you know, if I was out there vlogging or something and I wanted to keep my hand covering the camera a little bit so it wasn't so, you know, big and protruding out, you know, I can actually do this now without having to worry about the screen getting in the way. So one last little quick tip. That's it for my top tips on how to get the most out of your DJI Osmo Pocket 3. Ditch the full auto, tweak the settings that I talked about, and add the right accessories, and you will really stand out with this little camera. And if you want to keep leveling up your DJI Osmo Pocket 3 skills, I've got another video that shows you how to shoot real estate with this little yet powerful camera. So I will see you guys over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep creating.